developmental decade. In 1990, the General Assembly concluded that its goals for the third UN development decade had not been attained. It set new priorities and goals for the growth of the developing member nations with its International Development Strategy or IDS for the fourth United Nations Development Decade. The goals of the IDS were: Number 1, to speed up the pace of economic growth in the developing countries. Number 2, to devise a development process that meets social needs, reduces extreme poverty significantly, develops and uses people's capacity and skills, and is environmentally sound and sustainable. Number 3, to improve the international systems of money, finance, and trade. Number 4, to strengthen and stabilize the world economy and establish sound macroeconomic management practices nationally and internationally. Number 5, to strengthen international cooperation for development. Number 6, to make a special effort to deal with the particular problems of the least developed countries. The philosophy for the new IDS was based on the principle that because the developed countries have the greatest influence on the international economic environment, they have a special responsibility for the success of development efforts. It also recognized that speeding up development would require strenuous efforts by developing countries to increase domestic savings, rise investment and investment returns, hold down inflation, exercise monetary and fiscal discipline, maintain realistic exchange rates, and allocate resources more efficiently. Other provisions of the IDS included establishing more stable commodity markets, obtaining concessional terms for the transfer of technology to developing countries, and finding agreement on a way that the intellectual property system can promote development while protecting intellectual property. The IDS called for the eradication of poverty, hunger, adult illiteracy, lack of basic education for women, and runaway population growth in developing countries, and noted the catastrophic deterioration of the environment by short-sighted development projects. In 1991, the debt crisis of the developing countries had not worsened, but little progress had been made in terms of debt relief and forgiveness. The 1993 report on the world's social situation noted the positive direction of reform in the United Nations system towards coordination between various UN agencies with operations in the same countries. In October 1999, the report concluded that though there were improvements in the 1990s, economic growth had not accelerated in all developing countries. The Uruguay round had led to progress being made with the betterment of the global trading system, but the international financial system had not been stabilized. The world's least developed countries had seen negligible economic and social advancement during the decade. According to the report, development also pertains to education, health, and environmental standards, as well as to social equity. For this reason, the spotlight is now shifting from a focus on macroeconomic challenges to a number of institutional preconditions, including good governance, transparency and accountability, decentralization and participation, and social security. At the October 1999 meeting of the Second Committee, the group of 77 developing countries and China presented draft resolutions for the first United Nations decade for the eradication of poverty. The General Assembly voted to implement the decade and called on all nations to formulate and implement outcome-oriented national strategies and programs and set time-bound targets to poverty reduction. Acknowledging the information age, the Assembly resolution highlighted the importance of strengthening the cooperation between developed and developing nations in order to promote capacity building and facilitate access to and transfer of technologies and corresponding knowledge.